What is up, everybody? Purple and Gold podcast for Thursday, August 27th. Big goings on, obviously, in the world of LSU and SEC football relative to the eligibility of players who have previously signed contracts in professional sports leagues and what this now means for LSU. So let's start with what happened on Tuesday. The SEC came out with a statement that I'm going to summarize. Basically, if you declared for any professional sports draft and failed to withdraw, and or if you have signed a contract with any North American professional sports league, you are ineligible to play in the SEC. Originally on Tuesday night, there was said to be a unanimous vote among chancellors, presidents, and athletic directors. It was later clarified that when they voted on Wednesday, it was 15-0, with Dr. Wade Roos of LSU abstaining from the vote. The SEC has come out and said that if a school plays any of these players, there would be tremendous heavy penalties. Coaches could be suspended half a season. You could be fined half your operating budget. The SEC really has come down hard against this. The Big Ten has come down hard against it. The Big 12 and ACC are in the process, if not already, having followed suit. So what does this mean for LSU? Well, certainly R.J. Lewis on the basketball side, which we thought that would be an uphill climb anyway, would be ineligible. But so would Salu Niang, the wing player who actually was drafted by the Cleveland Cavaliers in 2023, I think. Even though he was a foreign player and he didn't technically declare for the draft, he was eligible for the draft. He didn't withdraw his name from the draft. He was drafted. He never played in the NBA. He's continued to play overseas, but I do believe this would make him ineligible. And obviously it would make Daquan Wright, Xavier Harris ineligible on the football side, as well as Jack Pyburn and others. It would make many of the basketball transfers ineligible. Mark Mitchell, who's trying to transfer from Missouri to Kentucky, he was in the NBA draft. There's a couple of other basketball players at some other schools. Obviously, Jack Pyburn, if he's cut by the Bucks, would not be able to join LSU's team. In response to this, the attorney who is representing these 33 athletes that got the TRO in Louisiana, including the 16 football players, they have doubled down, and he put out a statement today saying that he believes the SEC is in violation of Louisiana law. He believes that this statement, this ruling, the potential punishments, the SEC should be held in contempt of court. And he made a statement today basically saying he thinks Greg Sankey will have to appear in a courtroom to explain why they are doing this. Now, Lane Kiffin, his position and the position of LSU is going to be a little bit different. What Lane Kiffin said on the Pat McAfee show is that you shouldn't, as a conference or as the NCAA, you shouldn't be able to pick and choose what legal verdicts you're accepting and which ones you're not. And he pointed to Diego Pavia a few years ago and that ruling, which gave him eligibility back when they ruled his junior college eligibility did not count towards his 4 years of eligibility. And of course, he mentioned Trinidad Chambliss this offseason, who very comically convinced a Mississippi judge to give him another year of eligibility, which, on the basis of tonsillitis, and he should have had a medical red shirt even though he didn't, and whatever, and on down the line. I think that is the much more favorable argument if you want to look at that. I think what the SEC is doing is a very common sense thing, right? I've sat here and said it. Others have said it. It's bonkers. It's bizarro world. It's crazy to think that guys could come out of an NFL training camp and come back and play college football. However, it was one very select group of 2022 players who could do this. On Monday, there will be a hearing in Baton Rouge for a preliminary injunction. So you get the temporary restraining order. The temporary restraining order is a one-sided thing. The players and their representatives got that. No one was there to defend themselves on that. On Monday, the NCAA will have to defend their position on why they believe these players are ineligible. If the preliminary injunction is granted, it is my belief then that two things will be in play. One, LSU would have to risk plaguing these players in the face of the SEC's ruling, not the NCAA's ruling, the SEC's ruling, or it's highly possible that these individual players and possibly even the school will have to sue the Southeastern Conference. So we're in a situation now where it's sort of like, how far do you want to take this? How much do you want to buck up to your conference? And where do you think this ultimately goes? Now, Matt Hayes, who is a national college football writer for USA Today, he wrote a piece today in which he basically said everyone from Jeff Landry on down is at risk of getting LSU kicked out of the SEC. Now, let me say this right now. LSU doesn't want to be kicked out of the SEC. LSU doesn't want to go independent. LSU doesn't want to end up in another conference. I think we can all safely agree with that and say that and understand that LSU is a long-standing member of the SEC. The SEC is the most prestigious conference in most sports, and LSU has no interest in doing that. Certainly fences can be mended. A direct lawsuit by these players and by LSU on behalf of the players against the SEC would certainly be something that would be incredible. It would be out of bounds. It would not be something that would be totally shocking, considering the way LSU is doing this right now. And I'm in favor of most of what LSU has done. I don't believe R.J. Lewis has any eligibility left. I was not 100% on board with that. But I think in the case of some of these other players, you can clearly make the argument that the 2022 kids deserve one more year, and you can clearly make the argument that guys like Xavier Harris and Daquan Wright and Jack Pyburn likely would not have been in NFL training camps. They likely would not have signed NFL contracts had they known they were going to have a fifth year of eligibility. So here we are, 9 days away from LSU playing Clemson. And by the way, the vibes around this LSU football team are very good. Lots of people think LSU is really going to boat race Clemson. Clemson's had a ton of problems in their own camp. They've still yet to really name Chris Fazzina as the starting quarterback. He'll probably start. The Locked On Clemson folks and some other people who cover Clemson seem to think that Clemson has major problems on the offensive line and in some other areas. So when you start to break down the game, it's going to be a massive crowd. Game day is going to be there. First game, Lane Kiffin coaching, Sam Levitt, all that stuff. From the football side, you really give LSU tremendous edge in that game. And the question right now is, will Xavier Harris, Daquan Wright, and Jack Pyburn eventually, will they be playing in that game for LSU. I do want to say one other thing here too. If LSU were to take this to a point where their relationship with the SEC would be fractured, in financial terms, that would be a disaster. Okay, I think you can't afford to wreck your standing in this league. For anyone out there who envisions a scenario where LSU's now in the Big 12 and they rule the roost in every sport and they run over Utah and they run over the Kansas schools and they run over Texas Tech and BYU and they're winning in football and they're winning in baseball and all this stuff, that would probably be very true, but financially you'd be a much bigger fish in a much smaller pond. And in this day and age of NIL and rev share and expenses going up and paying players and paying coaches, you need to maintain your status in a very rich Southeastern Conference. So let's not get that part of this twisted. And let me just say this. I have enough confidence in Wade Roos and Verge Osbury and even Governor Landry. They will take this right up to the point that they need to take it. And then when these players are ultimately deemed ineligible by the SEC, they'll back down. That's my take on this. But I think there's a much more likely outcome that these players wind up with legal eligibility from the justice system, which will outweigh the SEC's ruling and vote on Tuesday and will make these players eligible. And the SEC will have to talk about this rule that they just put in place in a go-forward situation, that it won't retroactively apply to these players. I think that's the much more likely outcome. I also just briefly want to talk about the celebration of life for Coach Burtman on Tuesday night. It was a nice and wonderful event, certainly a who's who of LSU baseball, and I thought Ben McDonald, Jay Johnson, everybody who spoke, certainly Skip's daughter, I thought everybody was heartfelt, did a wonderful job, and it was another example in a long line of them of just how much Coach Burtman will be missed. And I really like what Jay Johnson had to say, that the way we honor Skip Burtman and everything he built for LSU baseball is by filing through those gates at Alex Box, driving to Hoover, driving to, and flying to Omaha, and making those things so special like LSU baseball always does. And as Jay said, it's his job and the players' job to make sure those things happen so the fans and the team can properly honor Coach Burtman. And I'm sure there'll be more moments of silence and other remembrances at the football game in 9 days, as they should. Everyone enjoy your weekend, and we will be back probably on Monday to start talking about LSU and Clemson. It'll be a game week. I will be on the Friday Football Fix tomorrow, WRBE-FM. You can listen to that at WRBEFM.com. And on all your devices, I will be hosting from 1 to 2 every Friday now going forward with Coach Bruce Thornton. And we'll be talking about all things college football, eventually NFL, fantasy football. We'll take questions. I'll put some social media feelers out later today, and we will certainly have a lot of fun with that. So, as always, be good to one another. Hold the rope. Always boot up. And always, 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 go Tigers.